talk to you today about video game music. You already know that because you're here. Basically, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me and like, why should I tell you about video game music, because you have like Wikipedia, so you can just look it up if you want it. I'm currently a third-year music student. I'm doing my Bachelor of Arts in Music in Edinburgh. My first study is actually vocals, but I do violin, guitar on the side, but I really want to be a video game composer, so that's why I know all this rubbish. And also, I've been a gamer since I was 1 year old. That is me. I was a very puppy 1 year old, but that is me playing. Actually, can someone tell me what the game is?
Mario.
Yay! Thank you. So basically, I'm going to start with
Mario.
Hey, Mario. I've known you for 20 years, man. Strong friendship. Okay, so I'm going to start with like, what the video game music world is like today. Last November, I got VIP tickets to Distant Worlds in London, and that's me, don't be massive, it's just it. Because I contacted the Royal Albert Hall, and they told me that tickets sold out in 2 hours, and there was 5,000 tickets. It was the most mixed bag of nuts I've ever seen. There was kids running about as Chocobos going, quick, quick, quick. There was generic nerds, there was people dressed up in CE uniforms, there was Shiva, there was ancient old people, there was young people, and I just thought it's amazing that 5,000 people that didn't even actually grow up with Final Fantasy, could all over here because they want to listen to video game music. So even though video game music is still a relatively new thing, it is popular. So yeah, we have Distant Worlds right now that does like live performances. It's just music from Final Fantasy. There's also Video Games Live. Video Games Live is like a mixture of multiple games like Super Mario, Assassin's Creed. And there's Zelda Symphony of the Goddesses, which is actually playing in London next month. And so is something called Final Symphony, which is music from Final Fantasy 6, 7, and 10. So, get tickets to that. In the world of video game music, you can get nominated for a Grammy now. That's pretty cool. He didn't win. He lost to Trent Reznor. Sorry, Austin. But the minute I heard, I was like, oh, so I'm gonna skip to like where did it all begin? It's probably before most of us were born. Pong. Don't know what Pong is. Pong was somewhat responsible for game sound. Like the bleep bleep. It was actually created by accident. They originally wanted like screaming crowds every time you got a point, but you couldn't do that in the 70s, technology was rubbish. So the guy spent half a day programming stuff, and the bleeps and bleeps was the best thing he'd come out with and just liked it. Sounds on arcades were mainly used to attract you to the machine. So, you'd hear like, well, that game sounds cool, but there wasn't actually a lot of music at the start of arcades in the actual gameplay itself. It varied machine because they all have different programmers made them. And it's very difficult to program, which is why all the sounds were not made by accident. These two pieces are arguably the first ever video game music ever, and it's quite funny when you think of the orchestras play amazing Final Fantasy music, and this is where it all started. Oh yeah. That was 1978. And this is Asteroid. In 1980, arcade manufacturers invented a PTS chip, which you can see is a programmable sound generator. It allowed for sound to get, better in quality. And sorry. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. NES came out in 1985, and it had a used custom-made 5-channel PTS chip. It was invented by a composer, and it had 3 channels. One was for use for lead, one for accompaniment, and one for bass. And the music you're hearing right now is by one of the most arguably well-known game composers ever, Koji Kondo. And if you don't know stuff he's done, then I don't know why you the Majora's Mask movies. He did the Legend of Zelda theme, Super Mario Brothers. He's done freaking everything. You all know what this sounds like, but I'm not meant to hear it, but that's what's happening. And the NES also brought us a little bit massive. It's like the king of video game music. He actually did compose for games previous to the first Final Fantasy. of where he became known for his pieces. This is known as the prelude now. Well, I don't know if any of you have been in this world, if you've heard this for his job, you can tell he's a good composer. So even that's like basic pieces, it's still oh, what's happening again? I'm going to skip ahead 16 bits. I only have an hour and so much game stuff to talk about. The first 16-bit console was the TurboGrafx 16. But it technically wasn't 16-bit because it just had dual 8-bit processors. Had it yeah, it didn't sell very well because this other bad boy came around, which I'm sure all of you own still. Yeah, Mega Drive. It had superior sound to the 8-bit NES, fancy TSG chip, Yamaha FM synthesis chip, this is all to be jargon to you, 6 channels of digitalized stereo sound, and it was the most popular console to employ FM sound at the time. Yeah, sample vocals still sounded really rubbish, but it was better than the NES. Has anyone watched Andy Video Game Nerd before? Yeah. And seen his Ghostbusters video? Yeah, that was what you love it. I could have put that clip in, but I got lazy. And music was still a really good adult program. Sorry for that. This is an example of this is an example of what composing in the 16-bit field was like. When games were developed, they used like routines, kind of like song structures. They often used loops and they just transpose them and repeated them over time. The longest loop you would find would be in level gameplay, and the shortest loop you'd find would be in boss gameplay. And this was part of this had like an ABC structure. This was to include a really awesome selection of this is a really cool quote by the composer of Sonic, which I find quite funny. It says, "Nowadays you'd just be able to send data through email. But at the time, I had to record audio onto cassette. The sound engineer would listen to them, reproduce them for implementation on the Genesis, Mega Drive for us, and then they'd send me back a bare game chip, and then I'd listen to it and check it. It's sort of unthinkable, but at the time, we just did it over and over until we got to the finished product. Now you can just buy that big and do it all yourself." Yeah, so they had to be programmed by hand. One channel had percussion, one for bass, one for melody, and others we used for fill chords or arpeggios. Yeah, and I already told you that. The main feature of the audio on Mega Drive was that it had lots of progressive rock influences, mainly because 16-bit technology got better, so you could implement sounds to sound like guitars more, so they decided to make use of that. And Nintendo were like, oh shit, man, what can we do? We need to beat Sega, so they brought out my favourite console ever. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It's arguably superior in terms of graphics and sound. It sold 56 million units during its entire lifetime. And yeah, the sound module consisted of the Sony SPC700, which is quite funny because you know Sony and Nintendo like hate each other right now. So it maintained like a chip-tune pop feel. When they brought out the SNES, they were kind of trying to get, even then, nostalgia for the 8-bit days, which I find quite funny. Yeah, there we go. Yes, the channel usage was very similar to 16-bits. So I thought I'd play a couple of pieces to make you all nostalgia. This was for the Aladdin game on the SNES. Also was on the Mega Drive, but as I said, SNES better graphics and the sound quality was pretty better. It was based off Elementary's original piece, but whenever I hear this, I'm just like, my childhood. And of course, back in the 16-bit days, we got Doj-Con again. I think SNES probably came into its own. Composer Grant Carbo's favourite video game music of all time is from this very game. The composer of like GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, which I found pretty interesting. And yeah, I'm trying to fit everything in this talk. I have like the wrap-up puzzle, so I should wear them, but I wanted to puzzle with my lady, so I was like, there's a Sailor Moon game on the SNES, and it was an RPG, and it's freaking amazing. Yeah, and the music is really cool. The guy
Hey Doj-Con, we are VGM Awesome, video game, radio and podcast. My name is Matt Double V, creator and host.
I'm John O'D, I am the co-host and retro specialist.
I'm Boomstick, I do film reviews.
I'm Crofty, I'm industry analyst and also a game designer.
We hope you guys are having a wicked weekend at Doj-Con and also enjoying Rosalie Newcomb's talk on video game music. To learn more about what we do and to download our latest podcast, please go to vgmawesome.com or indeed visit facebook.com/VGMawesome.
Now, we're going to be asking you 4 questions about the SNES era of video game music. So without any further ado, here we go.
You can win fabulous sweeties presented in this bag from the Nintendo World Shop from New York. That's actually a thing, it exists. It's like, oh my god.
Question number 1. The SNES saw the release of the very first Super Mario Kart game, but can you tell us on which racing track you hear this music? And the answer to question 1 is Rainbow Road.
Okay guys, the second question is, from what SNES game does this music track come from? Okay, and the answer to question 2 is Cornelia from Star Fox.
Okay guys, question number 3. The SNES had one of the greatest RPGs ever made on it. It was later ported to the PS1 and PSP. Can you tell us the name of this track and which game it comes from? Okay, the answer to question number 3 is Terrace Theme from Final Fantasy VI.
Question number 4. Where do you hear this track when playing Donkey Kong Country? And the next question number 4 is the bonus stage is the bonus units from Donkey Kong
We hope you guys have had an awesome time at Doj-Con and have enjoyed Rosalie Newcomb's music quiz. We'll catch you later.
Yeah, this is a cool fact point. It's kind of behind the dance PlayStation. Did you know that Sony and Nintendo were trying to bring out a console together? Hilarious! And they couldn't decide on what they wanted to do. They were trying to beat Sega. So then Sony went, no, screw you guys, we're going to do our own thing. And Nintendo signed a contract with Philips. You all know that? Came out in 1984. I remember pre-ordering mine. I was pre-orders. It was a 32-bit system, sold over 85 million units. Had a CD-ROM drive that could play all these CDs. Does anyone remember like the menu? And you select all of them and you watch it quite. I love that. Games were used, but you could pause and put your own CD in. There was a game called Viv Ribbon, which was like a music rhythm game with a cute little stick figure bunny. You could lift up the disc tray, put in your CD, and put on Green Day, Don't Judge, I was a teenager. And the levels would work to your music, so they kind of visualize, the levels would be like a visualizer, and it was pretty cool. It had a MIDI support to make programming easier, and it had a sound chip with 24 channels of CD quality sound. And it allowed for real-time effects such as looping, reverb, and pitch modulation. It was a bit backwards in terms of how the music was implemented because it relied on Redbook audio. And Redbook audio was better because it decompressed audio channels, so it sounded better, but the dynamic interactive bit kind of really suffered because of it. But there was a game that did not use Redbook audio, which was Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII didn't rely on Redbook audio. It relied on MIDI from an onboard synth chip, which allowed for more dynamic score and, you know, possibly it's still this day like the best game soundtrack ever. No. Yeah. We'll do some. So yeah, I was composing it with Matsu, and even at that time, the soundtrack was really, people bought it a lot, and it was really like, it was it. The PlayStation era from Uematsu was probably arguably his best work ever. You can get piano books to this, you can get piano collections, everything. I actually have most of those music books. And then Final Fantasy 8 and 9, the music's actually pretty awesome. It also had really cool music rhythm games. That's the cameraman is back there, to agree with Mr. Shopshop. Marathon is probably one of the most memorable music rhythm games ever. And weirdly enough, the tune is always originally composed in English, which it is my work today. And the composer actually, for this day, works with really famous Japanese pop acts, which is and I thought I'd play this little clip to show you how composing was implemented in the
Some
PlayStation
people
games.
work only for the money. Others do what they love most and manage to get paid for it.
You're not interrupting me when I'm working.
Stuart Copeland is in the second group. He's been making music all his life. First as a co-founder and drummer of the Police, then as a composer for films such as Rumblefish, Highlander 2, and Wall Street. Now he's writing music for Spiral the Dragon, his first video game project. What makes composing for video games fun? How does he do it, and why does he like it? PlayStation Underground visited his small, unmarked studio in Hollywood, where he showed us some secrets.
Step one is to beat the level. Now, for 10-year-old kids, this is no problem. But for me, I have to beat the level, figure out the jumping, and I kind of navigate my way through the levels. And the very early stage is a lot of fun because I find a level that I can beat and get an attitude for it, and then create a piece of music for it. Then as the game progresses and I start getting to some of the more difficult levels, I'm stuck immediately. I've got to beat this bad guy before I can stay on that level for long enough to write a piece of music for it. So I have to learn how to beat all the bad guys. If I was having to pay for my health line, I'd be running a huge tab here. So then once I'm on the level, I've got a general attitude for the game, I have to, within the atmosphere of that level, have a lot of different changes happen, but stay kind of in the atmosphere. Then I go back and I look for how to make those inner complexities more complex, and to have deeper sublayers and things that don't really hit you the first time, but hit you the 16th time, so they can survive repeated listening. Well, let me start something on the right side for you. Okay, well, I'm going to do something which is a trade secret here, but I have input quantize, which means I can play it very badly. It comes back and play it very nicely. And we'll loop those two bars there, so we'll just go around and around those two bars. Okay, now let's get some bass going there. Okay, that's a little bass line. Now let's get some drums out of it. Okay, now let's get some heavy metal going here. Okay.
show you that clip because it really shows that's how people still compose today. I sit there with my MIDI keyboard and Logic and I just like record that and then make it sound less rubbish. So yeah, Nintendo were like, well, Sony, you know, whatever, you know, CDI is awesome, well, whatever. So they went straight on with their new policy. Sold 30 million copies despite not having as vast a games library as the Sony PlayStation. It surpassed the PlayStation in terms of its technical capabilities. Not a lot of people know because they think that it's more blocky, cartoony, but it was actually better spec. The main processor that controlled the audio was capable of producing 16-bit stereo sound at a higher sampler rate than CD quality. Some games supported surround sound. They used MusicX, which was a sound program to compose with. And program lines were small, but not all games used the MusicX system. There's a game called Banjo-Kazooie, which didn't, and now we're going to have a pop quiz, and then questions asked by the composer of Banjo-Kazooie.
Hello, I'm Grant Cook of the Red Light. So, first question is, can you name the stage from GoldenEye that this track comes from?
He's from Edinburgh, right? Scottish composer, and he composed games for all the time and stuff. So name the stage that this comes from.
Subway level.
Yay! Thank you. Insert people today.
Second question is, this one's quite long, so to read it out. So sometimes with a composer, you get the opportunity to do sound design and voice acting. I voiced this character, but can you tell which N64 game it came from, which I also composed for? Good luck.
Yay! Who was that? Someone chuck a piece in and see the marriage game. Thank you.
The answer is Banjo-Kazooie.
Yay!
I also composed for Perfect Dark. Can you tell me where in the game you hear this track?
Where would you hear this track in Perfect Dark? Maybe it's a bit hard to know. Good, what's up here? No, where is Perfect Dark? You see it? What is it? Did I say the answer? I'll give you a video. Your guess is John Marston.
The answer is the training. Can you finish the rest of these lyrics from the Donkey Kong rap? So, my best rapping voice. So they're finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join them too. What's next?
So I think it's really cool someone from Scotland who's composed the Donkey Kong rap.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, you really sing it, but try to do it. Try to get it.
Put your hands together if you want to clap as we take you through this funky rap.
Put your hands together if you want to clap as we take you through this monkey rap.
Hey! I didn't think anyone would get that. Very impressed.
So I'm very good. Video composer, GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, and all the rest of it. If you wish to follow me on Twitter, I don't suppose you do. That's it. Goodbye.
dominated the game market, but they had really bad sales with their Sega Saturn. So they tried to fight back with... Sega Dreamcast came out in 1996. It was a 128-bit console, and despite how cool it was, it couldn't last very long. It had two processors, and samples didn't have to be compressed, which means real-time audio sounded awesome, and it produced some of the most brilliant video game soundtracks ever. So I'm just, I'm just gonna play.
When's Sonic Adventure?
When you start playing that game, I'm trying to get some Oh, dude, it's currently on PSN, streams on Xbox Live and HD.
Let's look at them.
And there's also music rhythm games that came out in the Dreamcast. There was Space Channel 5, which you know for like, right too. And there's also Samba the Amigo, which they did release in the Wii, but see when it came out on the Dreamcast, covered back carbon floor. These days you have like your D-things, so that's not as cool, but in those days it was so cool that the person that gave me their Dreamcast had that, and they went, I'm not giving you this because it's an import and you know it's worth a lot of money. I was like, oh. So yeah, I don't know about you, but when I do like my favourite video game soundtracks, this is second. It was composed by probably one of the greatest guys ever, June Senyu, sorry. It featured like, he had a band called Crush 40 which recorded a lot of the songs, and I don't need to play all these, but like, before I move away from that slide, actually, Crush 40 play live in the UK every year for something called Summer of Sonic, which is a Sonic convention. So, London.
August.
Oh, it's August this year. Oh, here.
Since 2008.
I should get tickets for that. Also, if you go on Crotchets and Chocobos.com in the next month, I'm releasing a video game cover EP, and you'll get to hear me sing Live and Learn. I do sing, like it's my job and stuff, so it's not bad. But you know, just buy it, because the money goes to Child's Play, which is a charity that gives video games to terminally ill children in hospital wards and stuff. So I'll post all that on the Facebook and stuff. So yeah, I'm moving really forward on for the PlayStation 2. PlayStation 2 had two processors. Samples didn't have to be decompressed. Yay, real-time audio was improved yet again, but cutscenes still had better quality than audio than in gameplay. Gameplay audio had to kind of make way for all the graphics and the CPU usage that was going on. But then we improved that more so when the PS3 came out. Woo! You know, there's lots of Xbox people in here. That was a big enough move for me. I'm sorry. You don't have to pay to play with our friends, and yeah, that's wrong with that. Yeah, you can run 512 channels and you can buy different layers and DSP filters in real time. It was capable of streaming audio in 7.1 at 960 dBs, but audio still has to compete to this day for CPU processing, and I really hope they freaking improve on that for the PS4. Go back time to show this video. I might not show you all of it. This is a video showing how they compose music for the PS3, and this is a clip from Red Dead Redemption, so John Marston, yeah. I won't take all of it. I'm going to get quite on here, but it's quite cool to see. If you don't have this game yet, do yourself a favor and buy it. Let's get it.
When setting out to create the music for Red Dead Redemption, the challenge was to exceed the high expectations fans have for the soundtracks and other Rockstar titles. Rockstar tipped their hat to the masters who created the Western music genre, while re-envisioning it for the 21st century. And making an original score that is interactive and changes based on what the player does. The goal was to complement the visually stunning game world with a score that is equally authentic. To achieve that goal and level of authenticity, Rockstar reached out to musicians that played traditional period instruments and utilized both digital and analog recording techniques. They brought on composers Woody Jackson and Bill Elm, who worked to show a respect for the past, but retool it for a modern medium.
All the Western, we were always into that stuff. This composers Morricone and Francis Lai and Bruno Nicolai.
I think it's definitely finding a balance, paying homage to what's there, but also trying to add our own stamp to the music.
I love the music from all those old Clint Eastwood movies and all that stuff has been a huge influence on me, and I've loved that music forever.
The team brought together top musicians to create an authentic Western experience.
You know, a lot of sessions are like trying to serve a song, whereas with this, it's more like just kind of coming up with an emotion, but being a little more vague about it, trying to be somewhat background material, but engage the listener at an emotional level at the same time.
Toco la trompeta y la quita el drum, y la trompeta con la quita el drum.
Grammy nominations in composing. Well, yeah.
Hello, Doj-Con. Hello, Rosalie. I am Austin Wintry, and I'm thrilled to be here to ask you guys a question. For those who don't know me, I'm the composer of the PS3 game Journey, which came out last year, as well as a game coming out in a couple of weeks that I'm very excited about called Monaco, which will be on XBLA and Steam. So take a look for that. The question I want to ask you is about a few years ago when I had the great pleasure of working with that game company on their first PS3 game, which was called Flow. Flow came out in 2007, and we were very fortunate that it was nominated for a bunch of awards. And even though it did manage to win a few of them, by and large, it was heavily overshadowed that year by a game that swept everything and was sort of the undisputed game of the year. So the question is, what was that game? It has become a sort of legendary game already in the 6 years since then. But for bonus points also, can you name the piece of music that was featured in the game, written for the game, which has now also become basically a legendary piece of music in the world of games?
Which year did you say? You all know what it is. If you don't know what it is, you can hear. In fact, I think I saw someone dressed up as something in here that don't know what it is. Yes, it's the world. Hey! What's the name of the song? Yeah!
Hopefully the answer is obvious, or at least somewhat. This is going to be the way that I answer it, and if this is still not enough, then I'm going to leave it to Rosalie. That's all I need to do, right? As I sit here trying to remember it suddenly.
Thank you, Austin. You know what's cool? See this lovely silly trooper right here? At Con last year, she sang still live on stage with Gladys herself. So that's on YouTube. I was going to include that, but I don't know if I had time, but she sang with Gladys. It's pretty cool. So what does the future hold for video game music? Well, first, multiple composers for own projects. So before you just have Koji Kondo and he'd work away his music. But now, like Mass Effect 3 has a ton of composers on the one project, and that's becoming a more and more fashion, which is good because if you want to be a game composer, more jobs. If you're looking to compose for things, video game music is where the jobs are at. I shouldn't have told you that if you're going to take my job. Yeah, established bands are now creating music, so not just composers. Help did the music for Max Payne 3. Don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Nausea did the music for the Devil May Cry reboot, came out at the start of this year. And more live concerts. Like I said, there's 2 in London next month, which is awesome. I did my thesis last year on the popularity of live video game concerts, and they're getting more and more popular, which is awesome. Distant Worlds even came to Edinburgh, and I was like, what? But you know, I already had a VIP ticket to London once, and I was like, it's now easier for anyone to compose. So is anyone here also a composer or wants to get into game composing at all? Yeah? Well, basically, get a Mac, get Logic, MIDI keyboard, and that's you sorted. You can use SoundCloud, you can use Twitter. I got most of my contacts on Twitter. Anyone can do it. Although there's more people doing it, the competition is quite terrifying. But yeah, it's easier. Back in the days, you had to know how to program to compose, and I don't know any of that crap. Kickstarters. The guy from Skyrim was a Kickstarter, the composer, so you can do all sorts of that now. And you know, I didn't mention PCs because I'm quite a console lady, but PCs, you know, there is still a limitation, but limitation for PCs is for audio is not as it is for consoles and all that. And of course, there's video game music bands. There's a lot in America. Probably is a couple here, but I don't know who they are, so they're probably crap. One of my favourites is a band called On Be a Human. And earlier we saw Grant, as I said, he did the music for GoldenEye. So I thought I'd show you a bit of this. This is their cover of a medley of the music from GoldenEye composed by Grant Kirkwood. And that's their little Twitter name at the bottom, you should follow. This is awesome. There's so many cool videos, like video game covers on YouTube I'm going to post it, but wait till you see this. iPhones are like consoles now, I'm like, no. But I mean, look how much Angry Birds has made, and like that famous French band covered the music from it and stuff. If you're getting into video game composition, the first big thing you're probably going to get to compose for isn't going to be the next Mario 3 sport thing, whatever. It's probably going to be a mobile app game, and Dundee's really good for that. That's what a lot of the students nowadays are doing. Indie games. Anyone play Bastion? Yes. Yes. The soundtrack to that was amazing. It was composed by Darren Ford, who I may be interviewing there. He's like, if you go on our website as well, I actually covered Build a Wall, which is one of the well-known tracks from that. Indie games is where it's at. Just that's where all the best music is coming from these days. I mean, Journey was an indie game. You're not made for Grammys. Chiptune. Now these days, you can just get a plugin or get the program Game Boy, and people are composing music, make it sound like it did in 8-bit. Even though you can have amazing orchestras now, they want it to sound cool and retro. So I've tried. It's a lot harder than you think. And of course, we have the next generation on its way in November, and we're all going to be ridiculously poor. But PS4, I watched the presentation, and they didn't really talk about the audio spec because, like I said, video game music isn't still in people's minds a really important thing when it should be. There's obviously a want for it to be good. But I'm going to keep my eye on what the PS4 can do, like with interactivity and how the music works, and if it's not as compressed as it is. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And before I finish, because I know it's getting really hot in here, these are what I call my Bibles for video game music. If you're just interested in the spec or the history, Game Audio by Aaron Marks, he kind of interviews people like Tommy Tallarico, and he tells them what his studio setup is, and it tells you what you should be doing. Like, you should be good at piano, you should be marketing yourself, and this and this and this. And Karen Collins, basically, if you read the book, it'll probably sound exactly like this talk. So thank you, Karen Collins. And if you want to go on like websites, OC Remix are like the main bad boys, and they've actually been in contact with me. So look watch that space. Top Score is a podcast. I don't know if it's available online on an iPhone. It's by Emily Reese, and she's interviewed Austin Mintori, Darren Korb, and she's one of the only interviewers for music, video game music, and she actually knows what she's talking about. I heard IGN use like music terms wrong, and I was like, no, I should have your job. But she's great, and they're all free. And of course, I don't know if you can see that logo very well, but the guys at BGM also, they know their stuff. The main guy in charge is composed for like Xbox Live games, and I'm their news host. So every week, if you want to hear me ramble more about games, I like to say the news and sound like someone from Six Music every week. I didn't do this week because I had to do this. So yeah, before you go, don't forget to visit my website. It's still a little bit under construction. It's being developed by the wonderful cameraman over there. Yes, it is. We're gonna have. I'm interviewing has anyone heard of Ellie Noir? Yeah. I'm interviewing the composers from that soon. I've got Ryan Herbert's interviews. I've got a lot of stuff coming, and I really appreciate you the website a look. And if, go on the Facebook as well, if you want to say, your top was awesome, or if you want to ask me stuff or composing or anything, because I do study music. And yeah.